Once again, thank you everyone for coming back after the break. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He has been one of my best friends since we met at one of Zechariah Sitchin's seminars in Los Angeles in, I believe, the year 2000. He is, besides a webmaster of being many sites, one of them is xfacts.com. Jason Martell has done numerous television interviews, radio show interviews, many of which he's invited me to join him, and we've participated together on Coast to Coast a couple times, plus other shows. I think he's one of the best web programmers and one of the leaders in web technology around today. His research into not only Planet X, but other ancient technology like the ancient Baghdad Battery and other things is astounding. I think you'll find his presentation insightful and very clearly presented. Jason Martell.
All right, thank you so much, Eric, and thank you everyone for coming today. It looks like we're having a great turnout. Now I have a plethora of slides to go through today, so I might be a little fast, but basically I'm just going to kind of give you a visual overload. So what I'm going to be talking about today is ancient technology. All throughout history, there are forms of artifacts that have been found from various cultures that have been miscategorized, if you will, as insect models or some type of sculpture that mainstream archaeology doesn't give it the classification that we're going to put it under tonight. So ancient technology. All throughout history, there are artifacts that have been discovered that have a very anomalous origin, and their function and purpose isn't quite accepted by mainstream science. This one, known as the Antikythera mechanism, served two purposes. It was an astronomical device so that you could chart where you are off the stars and navigating through the seas and using the stars as a navigation point. And it was also an astrological tool where people could tell you, if you were born on March 15th, then your planet sign is Mars, and these things are likely to happen to you. So it was a very interesting device, but what intrigued scholars is that it was more complex than a modern-day Swiss watch as far as the inner workings of the cogs and gears. So this is a very complex object to have come out of history, and it's dated back to around 250 BC. So very interesting piece of technology. And here you can see what it would have looked like fully assembled in its encasing. So another interesting area of technology, this is something that Giorgio and I just recently rehearsed in a show called Ancient Aliens, where in Egypt there are wall reliefs that clearly show light bulbs. And one of the alternative theories as to how they got all these very intricate wall reliefs and hieroglyphics is, one, they were using a torch. The other theory is they were using copper reflective mirrors. When you look into these deep recesses of tombs, there are no carbon soot on the walls. I mean, there's no flame, evidence of flame having been burned. So the only other theory by mainstream science is copper mirrors reflecting the light down these long tunnels, and that just doesn't cut it. An alternative theory is that they were actually harnessing electricity. And we see from these wall reliefs that there are clear inscriptions of what looked to be a light bulb, a very large light bulb plugged into some type of power source. Now what's interesting about these depictions is that, again, if this is a light bulb, then it would need some type of power source. And so, interestingly enough, in that same time frame of around 2500 BC, we find what look to be batteries. And this is found in Iraq, and it's called the Baghdad Battery. It's basically just a clay pot with a copper lining and an iron rod down the center. But when you apply a voltmeter to this, you actually generate a positive charge by using any type of acidic liquid. So vinegar, grape juice, wine, and you touch these two rods together, and it actually is generating a positive volt. And we were able to get on film 4 volts from using an object about this size. You figure a modern day battery is around 9 volts that powers our flashlights. Maybe multiply this by 200 and have a huge vat, and you could be generating a significant amount of electricity. Ancient engineering. All over the earth, we have these structures of advanced engineering that if you ask the local people, where do these structures come from? They say they were built by the gods. So how far back do these go? Some of the structures found, for instance, in Pumapuku have unbelievable advanced technology, yet these stones are thousands of years old. Who could have possibly have done this? The only people that we can date back in mainstream science would be people that are using stone tools and living in clay huts, yet they have advanced precision drilling. You can see here on the far right side of your screen that there is actually a mold for molten metal to be poured and to fasten these blocks together. We can see precision drilling in some of these holes. And the blocks fit together like Legos. So very advanced engineering for a culture that's now basically extinct as to who could have built these. So it goes very far back into antiquity. And as Eric mentioned, this infamous stone in Baalbek, again you can see the perspective of a human standing on these stones. These stones were left broken at the quarry site and then stacked 5 miles away. And we know that because here are the stones, one left at the quarry site that cracked. But interestingly enough, all over the world we have these pyramidal structures, and a lot of them seem to be astronomically aligned to star constellations. So we're seeing astroarchaeology appear all over the world in a pyramidal form, and it really begs the question as to what they were trying to tell us. And obviously, through the work of Eric von Daniken and Giorgio Tsoukalos, I always say your name wrong, it's Tsoukalos.
Actually, it's Miller.
Okay.
No, it's Tsoukalos.
We see structures all over Europe with the suggestion that there could be a correlation with the planets in the solar system. Pyramids actually marking places in the solar system as actual planets and laying these out as geographical points. So it's very interesting information to start to correlate some of this ancient knowledge and say, this couldn't have just been by chance. Some of these pyramids in South America have very strong correlations to Egypt. The base pyramid size of some of these pyramids exactly match the base pyramids of Giza, and they're aligned to the actual true north in such a way where even the Eiffel Tower doesn't match the precision of these pyramids in their alignment. And you can see the vastness of what we're talking about here. They take up quite a bit of space. So when we look at some of these more infamous ones like Giza, again, amazing knowledge that can be derived from this. Using star constellation maps and computer mapping software, we can basically tell you when the stars are going to be above you and at a certain time in the sky. Meaning a week from now, go outside in front of your house, look at the northern sky, and you're going to see Orion. Great. You can also go backwards in time and know exactly where constellations showed up over the Earth. And it turns out in 10,500 BC, Orion, the 3 stars with one slightly offset, is exactly above Giza's 3 pyramids, as you can see as a satellite photo, 3 pyramids, one slightly offset. In 10,500 BC, we have a terrestrial connection where the objects on the ground are emulating Orion, and the Sphinx, which is the object of a lion, is gazing directly east into the constellation of Leo, a lion. So in 10,500 BC, we have an astronomical alignment. Why? Who built these? Egyptologists claim that these were built 2500 BC by the Egyptians. Yet it's aligned to the stars in 10,500 BC. So there's a 8,000-year discrepancy where modern Egyptology says, well, we don't accept that they could have gone that far back, and there's actually even water erosion on the Sphinx so heavily that the last time there could have been floods of that magnitude in the deserts of Giza would have been 10,000 years ago, roughly, when we had a great flood. So again, some of these pyramids in Egypt, very interesting things. Here's the Bent Pyramid. This one actually just became open to the public due to their tourism needs to expand Giza and make some of the parts that were not so heavily off limits. Now it's like, oh, come and see the pyramids. So ancient astronomy. A very interesting fact is that the 12 constellations of the 12 houses of the zodiac, if you will, is basically a division of the heavens into 12 parts. And this was from a culture in ancient Iraq called the Sumerian culture. They were the first civilization on Earth, and a lot of the information that they have has been filtered through our modern day knowledge of math, sciences, education, and more importantly, astronomical pieces of information. And as you can see here, we can just show a breakdown of the constellations that we've assigned to the 12 parts of the heavens. But in some of the other cultures, for instance in Egypt, we're all familiar with hieroglyphs. Of course, I can't translate these for you. But I can point out here that on this stellar, we have some very interesting information that shows not only our solar system, but a more drawn out view of our universe that incorporates part of our solar system. Some of the symbols are actually highlighted here from the constellations that we're aware of, the Scorpion, the Bull, but you can see that this is part of a much larger diagram that's showing information, not just containing information about our solar system. So scholars today look at this and say, well, we're not really quite sure if they're trying to show us something about the underworld or how this works, but they have identified zodiacal symbols in these constellations and find it very interesting that it's got that much of a drawn out view of our universe. And you can see some of the detail here on one of the corners. And again, just showing the different parts of the heavens and how they've been divided into 12 parts. And the way this worked basically is at the time of helioidal rising, if you go out right when the sun is about to rise and look towards the sun, you might still see constellations in the night sky. As the sun's rising, whatever the constellation the sun is rising in front of, that's the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces. And that's how they were able to tell what time of, what area of precession we were going through as far as the zodiacal symbols. So some of the Sumerian artifacts, again, these are thousands of years old, also have zodiacal symbols on them and are telling us information from a culture that basically these tablets are in the realm of, we're talking like 4,000 years ago. 2000 BC, we're at 2000 roughly AD, 2009. So if you go back 2,000 years from AD to BC, and then go back another 2,000 years, 4,000 years ago, 2000 BC, these are all the artifacts coming out of the Sumerian culture that show all this information about the division of the heavens in 12 parts. And that gets into a topic of the 12th planet, another planet that exists, where not only did they cite all the astronomical symbols that we know of, but they said that the beings that visited them came from another planet within our solar system. I might touch on some of this in the lecture, but as I said, we're going to kind of jam through this since we're doing this only in an hour. The power of flight. This is a very interesting topic, because all throughout history we have depictions of flight. Ancient man putting wings on angels, putting wings on craft. It shows a fiery chariot in the sky. These are all depictions of the power of flight. And we see this recorded in all these various cultures. These are all from Sumerian artifacts found in either ancient Iraq or Iran. And they show what we call the winged disc, and has been symbolically a representation of coming from the heavens down to earth. And we see this filtered even to the Egyptian cultures as the sun god Ra with this winged disc. But the Sumerian culture was the first one to have this representation of winged beings visiting man, and they called these beings the Anunnaki. And that term just simply meant those who from heaven come to earth. But very interesting depictions of great detail that would basically mimic a modern day angel. But these are coming out of Iraq and Iran, thousands of years before the English translations of depictions of wings as angels. These are Sumerian gods coming to earth. We can see the similarities of how this has been filtered into Egyptian mythology as well. Some of the artifacts that come out of these cultures have been mislabeled. This one, as you can see, was found in the tomb in Egypt of a pharaoh. And these are labeled as a wooden bird model. Yet, when put together in a larger context of artifacts, this looks like a plane. These look like planes. And these were found in South America and labeled as insects, flying insects. They look just like a modern day prop plane to me. They've got the tail, and all these are aerodynamics of a plane, not of an animal or an insect. So it's a very interesting, anomaly when we look at all the information from all the cultures around the world, saying that they had a time where there was a power of flight taking place, and usually they attributed it to the gods. Now, that doesn't mean ancient man was flying around in spacecraft, but they were seeing things and giving it a spiritual review. They didn't understand technology. They couldn't call it a spaceship. So they said, I saw God. I saw the essence of God. Whereas today we're like, I saw an alien. So a lot of these depictions, again, this is just an interesting artifact, I thought, showing some type of context of coming down from the heavens. But all around the world, we have, throughout the cultures, this discussion of beings visiting man. And in the highest levels of every religion, it's just labeled as mythology. Here we have a very interesting fresco in a monastery in Yugoslavia, and a very infamous painting of Jesus on the cross. But as we'll see, and look how high up this is. This has been around since the 1500s. This isn't something that someone just wrote as, nothing. We can see that there's great detail being shown here. And as you'll see, some of the objects in this painting show flying craft and human beings piloting this craft. What are they trying to show us? What does this mean? And as you'll notice as they go through the detail of this, there are multiple craft. It looks like a human flying that. But you'll also notice that the other people in this drawing are shielding their face and are looking up at it in awe. And it's actually part of the drawing as far as the detail, that they clearly are aware that these objects are there, and the artist is making note of the people, taking notice. So very interesting artwork to come out of the Yugoslavia fresco from the 1500s. See, they're all like, oh my gosh. So what are they trying to show us? And these drawings, again, is it a depiction of God, or is that more to the line of what we would call a spaceship? Here's another interesting picture of the Madonna, painted by St. Giovanni, and you can see as a backdrop over her left shoulder, the artist has gone to such detail that they even depicted the man shielding his eye and the dog as well, and they're both looking up at the glowing disc in the sky. And this is famous artwork, religious artwork, that some people under further scrutiny have started to notice these details, and under our context of ufology start to see the correlation of, that looks like craft in the sky. Glowing shields that they're pointing to, coming down from the heavens. So a lot of these cultures show this information. What I've chose to focus on is the most ancient culture that we have record of, Sumer, coming out of ancient Iraq. And this is just a small collection of books from Eric's lead man, Zecharia Sitchin, who's done amazing work for 50 years looking into the Sumerian culture. And Sumerian culture, again, is basically that strip of land, Mesopotamia, also known as Babylon, today's modern-day Iraq. This is basically the Cradle of Civilization, where we find the first completed record of writing. And a lot of many of the biblical tales that we have in a paper version, we have found the actual stone versions, and they were excavated from here in Iraq. This is why you hear Mesopotamia, Babylon, Iraq, the Cradle of Civilization. The first culture on earth literally sprung up out of Iraq. Now that doesn't mean to say that there weren't groups or other societies that existed. This is the first complete culture that we found, a civilization with written tablets, cities, a whole way of explaining their way of life. Here's their system of writing called cuneiform script. They sometimes wrote on semi-precious stones. They used what looked like an oversized screwdriver and turn it and twist it in clay and make all these characters. First language right out of the Stone Age has 400 characters. We think we're cool with our 26-letter alphabet. Many of these tablets, as Eric displayed, are still waiting to be deciphered. And what's interesting about these tablets is they describe very interesting areas of mathematics that the Sumerians were aware of. And this is the same thing that we still use today that has been filtered into our cultures. Remember I said that they were the first ones to divide the heavens into 12 parts? Well, they also used a system of math where it was basically a division of all these numbers that you see here of what we still use today, 12 hours in a day, 12 in a foot, 12 in a dozen, 12 months in a year. All of this came from the Sumerian information of a breakdown originally of dividing a system of time and starting off with a calendar by dividing the heavens into 12 parts. So they had very interesting astronomical information. This is just a very interesting seal that, interestingly enough, shows their planet Nibiru symbolized as a cross with its moon, and then the 7 dots representing our Earth and our moon. We'll discuss that a little bit further, but they had some very accurate astronomical information. And as we start to look at some of these other areas, the information that they say they learned, everything they were taught was from these beings called the Anunnaki. So all throughout history, this interaction of gods visiting man has been recorded as mythology, yet this Sumerian culture actually recorded in stone when they lived amongst their living gods, just like the Bible said there were giants upon the earth. So this predates all the information of the Christian understandings of giants upon the earth or depicting angelic beings with wings. The Sumerians described their gods, the Anunnaki, as beings that they physically lived with and interacted with. So it's just an interesting twist from what we have in modern day religions, where we just say heaven's up there somewhere, but where is it? What are we talking about exactly? And it's just an interesting correlation of looking at how when we trace the origins of these biblical tales, the Sumerians are very specific in saying that their gods didn't just come from the heavens, they came from another planet. And this, again, is a depiction of a Sumerian god. And what I always like to show of interest, actually we'll go through a few of these slides. You can see, again, a depiction of a Sumerian god greeting a king. And real quickly, I always say that the people holding up that platform to make this happen, it's always a good saying. Zechariah makes a joke that they're taxpayers allowing that to take place. So this depiction of a winged disc, are they actually trying to show us representations of flight? We see these artifacts and depictions in great detail and relief all over Iraq and Iran. I don't think they would go to this great detail of making these without trying to actually communicate something of great importance to us. We see these reliefs all over the place, again, with the taxpayers holding a container. These wall reliefs, again, in great detail all over Iraq and Iran. And what's interesting is this ancient symbology of depicting man as a winged being, as the power of flight, might seem odd. But in comparison to what we do today with modern symbology, when we landed the first astronauts on the moon, I don't think 50 years from now they're going to look at this and say, what were they doing, putting birds on the moon? It's our way of communicating symbolically that we have the power of flight, just like the Sumerians were trying to say when they depict the Anunnaki with wings. So one of those infamous sayings when we first landed on the moon, of course, was Houston, the eagle has landed. And that, of course, correlates very closely to saying, you know, a depiction of wings as the power of flight. So this theory of ancient astronauts is one to say that, you know, who are we to say that we're not the first ones to go out and venture into space when we look at all this evidence to say that we've been visited. Another area is very interesting is that, you know, a great catastrophe. Everyone in the modern era hears things of Armageddon or an asteroid impact. The Sumerians and many ancient cultures have information that really bewilders modern science in the sense that here's a map that was found in 1929, believed to have been created in 1513, but derived from even earlier sources, and it shows the complete coastline accurately, and it shows the topography of Antarctica underneath the ice sheet, meaning if you go up to you know, the north of the South Pole, it's covered, the land masses, by miles thick ice, yet we have maps coming out of ancient history that accurately map this landmass underneath the ice. Unless they had ground-penetrating radar, let alone how would they get up that high above the earth to see this? No one knows. The only other answer is that someone gave them this knowledge. So it's a very interesting correlation of some of the ancient technology that comes out. Here's an actual tablet that's stored in the British Museum. It's labeled the Flood Tablet. Just like the Noah's Ark tale is a paper version of a story, this is the Sumerian original version of how a Sumerian is chosen by a Sumerian god to build a craft, to take the animals and plants, because there's going to be a great flood. Why was there a great flood? Because this planet, another planet within our solar system, was going to come by and cause gravitational effects, and basically would crack off a large part of our ice sheet, like an ice cube going into a glass of water. The waters would instantly raise. So they have a much more detailed explanation of the Noah's Ark tale and explaining why there was a great flood. And this is part of a much larger scope of a story and information. One of the tales, again, giants upon the earth, a Sumerian artifact showing them seated before a god. And again, it's very interesting how they depict these beings as much larger than the Sumerians. So this information about a Sumerian Planet X, some of you might be familiar with this term, Planet X, as a modern term where science beyond Pluto is looking for another planet. Pluto being the 9th planet, if they don't demote it. Planet X would symbolically mean 10, but also unknown. And interestingly enough, the Sumerians gave us unbelievable accurate astronomical information to the degree that here we see a tablet that shows our complete solar system in the backdrop with the sun in the center. Now, through the times of Copernicus and Galileo, do I have this slide? I don't. Okay, I'll just talk you through this. Through the times of Copernicus and Galileo, we thought we were the center of the universe. And it turns out the Sumerians were depicting this accurately without the use of math or telescopes, as saying that, actually, no, we orbit the sun. So this is very interesting to have a tablet that's this old and depicting this information. And actually that date, forgive me, is wrong. It should be 2500 BC. It's 4,000 years old, so excuse me there. So another interesting piece of the information from the Sumerians is they had all of the planets with Sumerian names and called, for instance, Mosh Sea, bluish green, describing our outer planets, as you can see here. They called us He. They said that we were on the 7th planet. Everyone hears that third rock from the sun term, like it's a cool TV show, but we're actually on the 7th planet. And if you count in from Pluto and go all the way in, you'll notice that we are actually on the 7th planet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Earth is the 7th planet. So if you're coming from the solar system outside in, they were accurate in telling us that we're the 7th planet, 7 days in the week, the sacred number 7. So here's just an artist's depiction of showing there are all these planets that we know of and an additional one beyond Pluto. Zecharia Sitchin and the Sumerians called it the 12th planet. We call it the 10th planet, meaning the planet beyond Pluto. They encapsulated a solar system model that was all of the 9 planets that we know of, plus our sun, our moon, and then Nibiru, making 12 planets. And then we have a very interesting record that comes out of the Sumerian texts and explaining how Planet X initially helped form Earth. We're talking 4.5, 4.7 billion years ago. The planets aren't fully hard yet. This intruder planet comes in, Planet X, Nibiru, passes by these planets, gets attracted into the gravitational pull, whacks our primitive Earth. Didn't actually hit us, but the moon of Planet X, labeled here North Wind, whacks our Earth, puts it in a new orbit, and that's what created our asteroid belt. Put Earth into a new orbit, and in doing so, left us as half a planet. But we all know today, through the idea of Pangea, Earth was at one point just one chunk of land. But the skin of an apple has peeled it off the continents on the surface to where they are now. Originally, it was just one landmass. Siphon off all the water, half a planet. Very interesting correlation to what the Sumerians told us 6,000 years ago in saying that, this initial collision that took place billions of years ago in describing the formation cosmology of our solar system. Planet X's moon hits Earth. It creates the asteroid belt. Earth is moved over right next to the asteroid belt in Mars in its new orbit. Just very interesting that the Sumerians, this ancient culture, right on the money with giving a very logical explanation for our cosmology. And you can see again all the pieces fit as they teach in school. And there's our half planet Earth. So the the orbit of Planet X goes around our sun once every 3,600 years. We have a solar year of 365 days. One orbit around the sun is a year. For them, one orbit around the sun is 3,600 of our years. So just an interesting thing to think about, that if you're living on another planet and it goes around the sun 3,600 years of our years, it's still just 1 year for them. So I always like to hypothetically say, if you were an Anunnaki and you're living on Planet X, let's say Jesus was an Anunnaki, and Jesus comes here at 21 and says, "My people, live well and care for each other." Leaves for 3,600 years go by on Earth. He just goes back on Nibiru, one orbit around the sun for him. He comes back. It's been a year for him. He's aged a year. It's been 3,600 years on Earth, and he still looks like Jesus. So very interesting correlation of saying when you die, you go to heaven, and this whole thing with Christian philosophy of saying you're rewarded in heaven with a longer life. This is some of the correlations that come out of Sumerian tales, where Noah is talked about having a lifespan of 900 years. These tales going further back, the Sumerians describe this information of how when you go to Nibiru, being on a longer orbit, these lifespans were achieved. So very interesting correlation of the Sumerians talking about another planet, beings coming from that planet visiting us, and our modern science today looking for a planet within the same correlations and confines of what the Sumerians are describing. The modern terminology today is giving you all types of labels for the chunks of ice they found beyond Pluto and called it Planet X, but it's not. These are small, 800 miles, 1,400 miles. The Planet X we're talking about, if you hear this term again in the news, folks, Planet X, it needs to be a planet 4 to 8 times the size of Earth. Then there's something to be interested in. Some astronomer in Japan that says, oh, we have a new Planet X and it's a little tiny planetoid. No. The research going back from Zecharia Sitchin and Dr. Harrington here at NASA, they compared their orbital models. The NASA model of a highly elliptical orbit, Nibiru with a highly elliptical orbit, match and correlate. So in modern science, we see this being discussed. Planet X, a mystery around the sun. Something is out there beyond Pluto. We don't know what it is. A 10th planet. So our technology today is allowing us to pierce the veil of space with using infrared. And there was basically fine layers of dust out in space where they tried to use the Hubble and various other telescopes, and they would just get blurry images. With these new telescopes, they're kept super cooled in space, and they can adjust the temperature of the telescope to basically peer through using infrared, peer through the dust, and get crystal clear images. All these bright objects that you see there are other suns with worlds around them, other little solar systems in just that one galaxy. And you can see the amount of detail that we're now able to get when we normally had just visible light under these new telescopes using infrared, look at the detail that comes out. So we're really making a lot of advances in science, and even some of the theories that are coming out in modern science. This one was on the Discovery Channel about a year ago. Couldn't help it but hit DVR record, because this is, they're calling the Orpheus theory. And they said that an intruder planet from outer space, way out in the depths, whacks our Earth, and that debris coalesces into our moon. Very similar to the Sumerian model of an intruder planet comes in and whacks Earth and raises the asteroid belt. Very similar to some of the mainstream science saying now, yes, when we incorporate another body into our solar system model, it explains why Uranus is tilted on its side, why Pluto and Neptune possibly were first moons of Saturn have been dislodged. So a very interesting piece of information. Another thing I like to point out here too is two things. One, people have heard this term MJ12. Anyone deeply rooted with ufology has heard MJ12, the secret organization. I always like to correlate the fact that Planet X, we're talking about the 12th planet, and interestingly enough, passes between Mars and Jupiter. So that's MJ12, Mars, Jupiter, 12th planet. But that's just another little, doesn't really mean anything. But if you look here on the map, you can see between Mars and Jupiter where the asteroid belt is, there's clearly enough room for another large planet to pass freely through there. So one of the things about Planet X is in the past, 2003, in 2012, even people have been saying, Planet X is going to be what's coming to kill us. Just a simple mathematical equation here shows that 4.7 billion years ago is initially, when I showed that diagram, it came in and whacked us. Then it goes on to have a 3,600-year orbit. So from that initial collision, 4.7 billion years ago, divided by 3,600 years, how many times it goes around the sun? It goes around the sun once every 3,600 years. That equation shows that it's already made its orbit over 1 million times that it's come around the inner part of our solar system. So it's very possible that not every time Nibiru orbits around the inner part of our sun that it's causing gravitational effects on our planet. It might be on one side of the sun and we're way over here. I have no idea, but a lot of people really try and speculate that the next global catastrophe is going to be because Planet X is being spotted and it's there. I assure you folks, we have such a multitude of amateur astronomers that if anything 4 to 8 times the size of Earth is anywhere near us, we're going to see it. Okay, so I'll kind of start to wrap it up here. Ancient gray aliens, very interesting correlation of what we find coming out of the Sumerian culture, are beings that assisted the Anunnaki. And they called them, there were certain instructions that you would go question-wise that you could ask these beings to find out whether it was alive or not. And they basically acted as though they were alive but were not. It sounds like a robot or an android. And these very interesting, beings or helpers of the Anunnaki look like today's modern-day gray aliens. So maybe if the Anunnaki could have genetically taken the hominoid that was here and put their genes in their image and after their likeness, just like the Bible, and created us, why couldn't they have taken another genetic race? Maybe all these beings look the same for a reason, and they're the watchers, kind of watching over the grand experiment here on Earth of the human genetics. I'm completely speculating there, but it is an interesting correlation when we see these depictions of these helpers of the Anunnaki and their close proximity of what we call today the Greys. So one last area I'll show is that there's some very interesting things about Mars and Earth, and we've been sending a plethora of probes, and our data has been increasing more and more to the degree that you can see today now that we get terabytes of data, coming from our satellites. So we're learning more and more, and as we can zoom in, we can see actual changes in real time taking place. You can see the dates change and how over time there's some water that started to drift down on the side there. So you can see the pixels in ratio. Our quality is getting so much better, and we're going to be doing a lot more activities on Mars. So it's very interesting to look at some of the things that we've been finding out about Mars, because NASA's not the only one there now. Japan is there, the ESA, the European Space Agency, is there. And when we look at some of the record of NASA, these are images that I found doing some research into NASA of my own that are from 1979 on the surface of Mars, and they show snow on the surface, water basically, right on the surface of Mars. Another thing is that if you color correct it, meaning the camera lens on the orbiters are not human eyes. They're taking in a much larger spectrum of light. When you do just a simple algorithm of RGB, what the human eye processes, like if we were standing there, it looks like that on Mars, blue skies. But for some reason, they have this tendency to want to keep it looking red. And we all, oh, the red Mars, and they just thought it was a cool thing, and they just went with it. That's not the surface of Mars. And so some of the details that we have here, NASA, for instance, shows this in black and white, and doesn't really give us any detail about what that is on the surface of Mars.
Grass.
Well, interestingly enough, another agency, ESA, was nice enough to shoot the Gusev crater, same coordinates, in color. That looks like vegetation to me. So a lot of these things that are coming out about Mars and its past and its watery life past, there's also a lot of artifacts and things that we've been familiar with, the face and pyramids and some of the things that we're imaging now. You know, the face, obviously this was imaged in 1976 and quickly dismissed as a trick of light and shadow. Nothing to see here, there's no face. But under a different satellite pass where the orbit is in a different angle and the sun's in a different angle, face is still there. Not only that, but as we can see here, I've labeled land and water. You can see a terrain change from where it's brighter, knobbier terrain, and it goes into darker, more mellow terrain. And so I make the comparison that if we look at these separations of the land and the water, it looks like all the structures are on the landmass, pyramids, things here in the corner. And the face is out as if it was in some water, just like we would have today, where there's monuments. Everyone loves to live on waterfront property. Why not on Mars? So these objects are all built in a way where they're right on the shoreline, situated so they can look at the face as a monument. Now this face on Mars has gotten all kinds of scrutiny. In 1998, it just got so bad that was the face on Mars. It's like the resolution got worse. 1976, 2002. What's going on here? What's up with the resolution? That's okay, NASA. NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, could also be never a straight answer. They've done a lot of tampering with the data. I'm going to kind of go through a couple of these slides because I want you to look at something else here. When we take this, even this poor image and rotate it so it's looking at you head on, split it down the middle, we're all asymmetrical, meaning if I stand and look in a mirror with only half my face, it should still look like me in the mirror because my face is asymmetrical. Taking this photo and doing that same line of thinking, when I split these two in half, the side that's not so well eroded, we can see this on the left, and we'll get to that. But even the right side, it still has facial characteristics. The left side, less eroded, mirrored, those are facial characteristics. We have some type of a headdress, eyes, nose, mouth, symmetry of a face. There's just too much of a coincidence here for this to not be something that merits further attention. And again, we can see here under higher resolution, there's now other objects. This is something that's being looked at now by people. Very fortunate to have given the last lecture with a gentleman named Dr. Tom Van Flandern, who passed away this year. In his last lecture, he was showing evidence of this enlarged area I have here where there's tubes on Mars. And you can just look at that on your own on YouTube. Just type in tubes on Mars, and there's an amazing array of all this high-resolution data showing these structures, what look to be like tunnels on Mars, connecting a lot of these structures. And again, you can just see verses 76 to 1998, looking at the pyramids that I point out, 1 and 2, they're actually under higher resolution, which is the gray strip. It's still a pyramid. There we go again, just showing the correlation. 1998, and zooming in, they still look like pyramidal structures. The one in the city here in 1976, we weren't sure, but under higher resolution, it's still a pyramid. It looks like a pyramid. We don't know what these could be. I think the only answer for us to find out what's on Mars, and maybe we'll discover we have a much richer history, is we actually need to send people to Mars, not these robots. What happens now is we send a probe to Mars. Some gentleman at NASA has been working 10 years on a little device that's going to stick it into the dirt and see if there's a certain type of chemical. It's not sticking it into the dirt and saying, I'm looking for life or signs of life. It's looking for something other than just that. So what the problem is we have a bottleneck in science right now where there's probably life on Mars, but they don't have anything to stick into the dirt on their probes that's going to say, yes, it's life. They're looking for things leading up to life. So unfortunately, we have to kind of go with the technology because, I think one of the other countries like Japan or ESA, they'll have something ready to deploy and we'll be like, bing, we found life. But unfortunately, that's kind of a bottleneck we have at NASA is a lot of the things that we're deploying. It's not a meter attached to the probe ready to say, I'm looking for life. It's looking for chemicals that are going to be leading up to signs of life. So we need to kind of catch up with our technology. I think I'm going to go ahead and end it there, folks, and I'll take a few moments for questions. When I'm saying the Earth is the 7th planet, yes, then planet X would be, no, if Earth is 7, planet X would be 12. So the Sumerians counted a model of 12 planets, and they had very accurate astronomical information. And based on them saying there's 12 planets, they said that Earth was the 7th planet. Anyone else? Questions?
Question from the web. What is your view on 2012?
My view on 2012 is that there is no correlation with Planet X and 2012. Quickly I'll say about the Mayans is that they've made several predictions on their long count calendar, which isn't more or less a day-by-day calendar, it's a prediction calendar. And they made a prediction that in 2012, which even isn't the same calendar as ours, but in 2012, the end of time takes place. They made another prediction that said their god Kukulkan was going to return on a certain date. On that date, the conquistadors showed up, conquered the Mayans, burned their codices, and aggressively converted them all to Christianity. So they haven't always been correct in their long count calendar predictions of how things are going to play out. So in 2012, I don't give much credence to say that anything other than hopefully the sun will shine on that day. Another question, yes, ma'am?
Is there an actual countdown from 3,600 and when is that?
That's kind of an esoteric topic that I probably would be the best to answer. Zachariah Sitchin, who does very advanced work, has come out with information when he says the last date of this passage took place. Eric, do you know that exact date?
The returning date?
The last passage date.
Well,
I don't know.
we know it, but the orbital period of 3,600 years can deviate 1 to 2% every orbit. So it could be off 100 to 200 years each time. Zachariah's estimated the returning date is 2085, approximately.
Gotcha. Anyone else? Another question? One more. Yes, ma'am.
So we probably invaded Iraq for this kind of information, and what are they doing with the stuff that's there now to keep it from us? Are
Good
they
question.
hiding it?
Yes, ma'am. Well, originally when the whole thing took place in Iraq, where there was the looting, behind the scenes information came out from the ufology channels that two things happened. One, whether or not any of this is confirmed or not, I don't know, that basically Saddam Hussein got himself some nice alien technology and started reverse engineering it. We didn't like that. Thought, oh my gosh, this could be bad. We gave up some excuse to go in and invade him. And when we did it the first time, he was hanging out in these ziggurat pyramids that are of such, wealth of history, we couldn't bomb them, so we couldn't get them. And then the second time around, it's the same idea, is that he had access to technology, and he was even going to the degree he wanted to set up an Anunnaki theme park, and was requesting the British Museum send him all the original replica seals and such. Replicas that he had, he wanted the originals, and they were going to make this big museum. So when this looting took place, there was a coordinated effort, from what I was told, people with little earpieces and devices where they were able to get into locked areas. And they didn't, like, that someone broke a window and grabbed an artifact and ran. There was a coordinated effort that took place. So I don't know what to tell you other than, yes, those artifacts have a very important historical value. I can see why they would have been looted, but there was a lot of ufological information coming out around Saddam Hussein as a possible reason for why we chose to snuff him out when we did. Yes, Jordan?
Jason, the 7 equal circles, you were commenting on that briefly.
Yes.
What did those represent again?
To be honest with you, I'm guessing on that because I went through the British archive and I've been looking at Sumerian artifacts for so long. I found what looked to me to be the symbol of Nibiru with its moon, and then the 7 dots of Earth depicted with its moon as well. Last question.
Question from the website. I'm from the web viewers. Somebody says, Robert Dean says Planet X can be seen by the Naval Observatory. Have you heard that?
No, I would answer that in saying Dr. Harrington, who we showed in the lecture, did collaboration with Zachariah Sitchin in the late 80s from the Naval Observatory in collaboration about the Planet X. There has been rumors of a telescope in in the Antarctic, if you will, that's now filming Planet X. I can't confirm that. I've not seen anything on that note. And again, what I would say is that anyone out there saying that they're taking pictures of Planet X with a webcam or something near the sun and they're showing a bright object. My personal opinion, that's fine. I'm just saying that my personal opinion is that anything 4 to 8 times the size of Earth is not something we're going to be able to hide. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there, folks. Thank you so much.
One quick
Sure,
thing
go
on
ahead,
your
Doug.
website.
Okay.
On your website, there is a really neat video called Life on Mars, and it was the Naval Observatory astronomer. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. It goes 13 minutes, and then
Yeah.
it cuts off. Where's the rest of it? It's
Yeah, that's
so
a
good.
video. Great question. That's a video you can buy from Amazon.com. It's called "Are We Alone?" and it's by Zachariah Sitchin. Yes, that was just a small excerpt of it. It's a good video.
From the astronomer, the one.
He was just part of the video being interviewed. That's the one I'm thinking you're thinking about. So it's called "Are We Alone?"
You know, it's called Life on Mars.
Then yeah, I couldn't tell you. I'm not
It's
sure.
13 minutes of something.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Really
I
good
couldn't
stuff.
tell you. All right, folks. Thank you very much. We're going to take another 15-minute break here, and then we're going to wrap it up with Mr. George Norrie doing his